So WABC Talk Radio had done this interview with Bob Holden, who is a New York City Council member who is term limited. He's on his way out. And Curtis Sliwa, who is running for mayor of New York City on the Republican Party in this year's election. And the two of them were discussing carriage horses. And I've been meaning to dissect this interview for a little while now, so I figured now is as good a time as any. I am home early because the carriage horses were suspended to the heat, due to the heat. Well, actually, technically today was a humidity suspension, not a heat suspension. So I figured I would just kind of record the clip and pause it and correct like everything in it. I also want to point out that Bob Holden is the city council member who has the current carriage horse ban bill introduced. We've gone through so many of them over the years. They all fail. This one is not going to see a hearing or anything like that. It'll be expiring the end of this year when we have a new mayor take office. And we'll see where that goes. I have mentioned before that Bob Holden was basically, paid by animal rights lobbyists to, take this position. But he isn't really too strongly involved in the animal rights movement. This wasn't like his bill because he wanted it to be his bill. There was a different council member at the time who knew that if he introduced this bill, it would be very unpopular and he would have no shot at becoming Speaker of the City Council. Now, he'd not become Speaker anyway, but he was attempting to at the time, and he knew that he couldn't introduce this bill because of that. So he was like, hey, I'll get my pal Bob Holden to introduce it. And that's why this council member is only a sponsor of the bill, a co-sponsor of the bill, and not the sponsor of the bill, not the one who introduced it. And Bob Holden has kind of bragged about how he introduces like hundreds, if not thousands, of bills that never go anywhere. So he's just like, yeah, sure, I'll introduce another one that no one likes.
Councilman Holden, we need to remove the horse carriages from Central Park and replace them with electric carriages.
Okay, so I've done a video about why that would be so ridiculous and bad, and no one wants that. But I guess I will respond to that. So the draw of a horse carriage ride is the horse. Once you remove the horse, drivers don't want to drive it, customers don't want to take rides in it. That's the whole point of the ride. Electric carriages have failed other places that they've been introduced because people just aren't interested in them. We have illegally motorized pedicabs all throughout the park and city, and that's, the other option already that's there. Electric carriages are essentially cars. Cars are banned from Central Park. They would not be permitted to be in the park. There are just so many countless reasons. I mean, the children feed the horse a carrot at the end of the ride. What are they going to do with an electric carriage? The batteries are a big problem for the environment. They don't work well in the cold weather. New York Class had a prototype of one that they tried out, and they had to ship it to Florida because it just did not work in the cold weather. There are just countless reasons as to why that is a very bad plan, a very bad idea, and it's not currently in any legislation. The current carriage horse ban bill would just simply ban the horses, and that's it. It does not offer this other, idea that he's pushing.
What happened with that whole issue?
TW100 represents the horse carriage industry, and that's the key word, the industry. They don't represent the drivers. But they're a powerful union.
So again, I've done a very long video on our union, how it works, who it represents, and all of that. But the short response to this is entirely false. This council member has been informed of this, but continues to repeat this falsehood. Our union, TWU Local 100, represents horse carriage owners and horse carriage drivers. And everything they do also, in turn, ends up protecting the horses that we drive. So it's also the horses union in that sense. There are carriage owners paying dues, and there are carriage drivers paying dues. The union works for both the owners and the drivers, and the person that represents, normally when you have a union, you have a boss who is like what the union is working between, negotiating between the boss and the workers. In our industry, our boss is the city, who sets our rate, who sets our regulations for our horses, who sets our laws. So all the negotiations and all of that goes on between the city government agencies, and our horse carriage owners and horse carriage drivers. So our union is the group that is working, in between those two, negotiating in between those two. It is not that the union is only representing carriage owners and their interests. Carriage owners' interests are carriage drivers' interests. This is all the same business. The carriage driver goes out there, earns some money, gives the portion that they owe to the carriage owner for the amount of rides they did to the owner. So they're really their own boss when they're out there. This is honor system here. And they are the ones that are, union members. This idea that the union is, representing owners is not true. And then the question, though, that he's asking about, why has this bill not gone anywhere? Part of it is correct, that our union has been very helpful in, stopping this from going anywhere. And the other part of that is there's no interest for it. New Yorkers like us, tourists like us, the majority of the most logical, sensible part of the population likes us. There's just no reason to do away with it. There is no reason to replace it with something inferior.
But all we know is that the horses are being abused.
Okay, so as we know, that's an entirely false statement. That slanderous statement the council member is making can easily be disproven if you look at the records that the government keeps. There have been 0 horse carriage drivers convicted of animal cruelty in the history of the New York City horse carriage industry to date. So that is just false. They have not found any evidence of abuse in this industry, and it is wrong to perpetuate this false narrative.
What is their life like? So just picture it. They work in horrendous conditions, all cold, heat, on the streets of Manhattan. Congestion, pollution, noise, tremendous noise.
So again, we have a whole bunch of the same animal rights ideology and animal rights talking points that they just make you spit out again and again, that we've debunked a million times here, and this council member knows better. So first of all, he says they work in horrendous conditions of heat and cold, which we know is not true, because the reason that I am making this video now is because we are suspended because it was too humid for the horses to work. The humidity level combined with the fact that it was over 80 degrees. And that's been debunked heavily. We are well regulated. We have laws that protect the horses from working in all kinds of weather. So that's just a complete falsehood. Then he says that they work on the streets of Manhattan. Nope. We work 98% of the workday inside Central Park. As you can see from most of my videos, we're in the park all day. We have a short commute between the stables and the park. There are times late at night the carriage horses are permitted to go to Rockefeller Center and Times Square. They're only supposed to pick up and drop off at the park. There are very few horse carriages that even do that. So really what we're talking about here are the carriage horses that work in Central Park. He knows that, but it is not true that they're working their regular shift in the street. People occasionally ask me for rides in the street, and I have to tell them, no, it's actually just a loop in the park. We do a Central Park tour. So that's just not true. Then we get to where he says that there's traffic congestion. There are no cars allowed in the park, and most of our commute, like, this is not an actual issue for the horses. I mean, I've showed you a little bit of body camera footage. It's really not a big deal commuting between the stable and the park. And he also mentions noise. I don't know if I've done too many videos on this. I should probably try to pull some up. But you'll see that my horses, all our horses, like, really don't react to noise. I mean, the sights and sounds of the city for them are just the everyday. So it's just like you have people living here perfectly comfortable, not bothered by, sights and sounds of the city. You have animals that live here not bothered by it. Then he mentions pollution, which there's no pollution. What pollution is he talking about? I mean, like, air pollution? Like, we have better air quality in the park than, like, than pastures that horses vacation on in Pennsylvania. Like, in rural areas with, like, farm equipment and stuff, that makes the air quality a lot worse. I'm not really sure what he's getting at there. We also do not work the horses when we get air quality alerts. When it hits 150 of that AQI, we don't work. We get a suspension through the city. So, again, this is just false.
And then they have to pull thousands of pounds of a carriage.
Okay, again, I have done a video on this. Our horses, first of all, they're horses. They're not puppies. They can pull. They are built to pull. They have a lot of muscle. They're very strong. They're big, strong animals, domesticated and bred so that their bodies are designed to be the perfect pulling machine over 6,000 years of domestication. That's just first of all. So the horses are horses. Like, I don't know when to, you hear, like, eat like a horse or strong as a horse and all these things. Like, when did it become a horse? A horse can work? A horse must be so hard for a horse to do. Like, no. There are, like, stereotypes and jokes about this kind of thing because horses are strong animals. First of all. Second of all, what they do is not actually pulling. When they push their collar, they push into their collar, that is attached to traces, that is attached to straps that are attached to the carriage. When they push their weight, they push their shoulders, their chest into the collar. When they push that forward, pushing is much easier than pulling, that propels the carriage forward because the carriage has wheels. So those are how, the physics of that work. Just like when you can push a heavy shopping cart in a supermarket, it rolls along very easily because of wheels and the whole physics there. It's really not difficult to do that. I'm a small person, about 100 pounds myself, and I can pull the carriage myself, pull it. It would be very easy if I had a harness and was pushing into it to propel it forward. But because I can do that as a small person, it's insanely easy for my horse to do. So no, they are not dragging this dead weight that he makes it out to be. This is very easy work.
And their feed, by the way, if you ever go by Central Park South, their feed is a bucket with all pigeon droppings in it. The pigeons are all feeding off their feed.
Okay, I think you've seen my horse eat from the bucket a few times. There's no pigeon droppings in it. It's like, what is this weird bias this council member has with pigeons? He's like, he eats pigeons. I mean, not much I've gotten out of this. Yes, the pigeons occasionally do eat the horse's oats as well because our horses will often be pretty messy. They will spill some oats outside of the bucket. And the pigeons eat off the ground there, and they collect some of that extra. Occasionally a pigeon might fly in the bucket. Yeah, it's possible. The horses kick them out, or we kick them out. Once in a while you do see that. But no, the pigeons aren't pooping while they're eating in the food. I have never seen any pigeon poop in food, in horse oats. I don't think anyone has. Our horses have been eating this way for literally over 160 years at Central Park. You can find super, super old pictures of the carriage horses eating some type of oats, grain, from a bucket, or something similar. They used to have feed bags. They had a different type of, bridle setup and all of that back then, maybe. and there were often pigeons around them, and all of these years we have never had issues like this. So now he's just like drawing up like issues that don't even exist.
We're treating these horses like slaves, essentially. You got to pull for our entertainment, for human entertainment. That's disgusting.
Okay, so I've done a whole video about comparing carriage horses to slavery, and it's so that is what's disgusting. I cannot believe a New York City council member is just, equating a well cared for, happy horse doing work that benefits them mentally, physically, covers the high cost of the care that they get, the cost of hay and all of that, some vet bills and all of that, and he is equating it with people that are slaves as if this is the same thing. Like, do you not realize how dehumanizing that is? Like, to just, belittle slavery is, like, absolutely disgusting. I cannot believe that a political figure would just casually say something like this. First of all, and as I have said, it is obviously not like slavery at all when you are in a mutually beneficial partnership with an animal. Horses need work for their mental and physical health. They need it to thrive. And another thing that he says here is that the horses are doing this for human entertainment. If he is not against people owning cats and dogs, which is for human entertainment, then he's a complete hypocrite, because right now he's just trying to get the animal rights animal rights activist voters on their side. And that is really disingenuous, because this is not an animal rights activist. This is someone trying to appeal to that base by, using their key phrases.
And it is really heartbreaking to see the horses. We could use electric carriages that are just as charming as a carriage that a horse is pulling, except minus the horse. Who would be against that?
Wait, did he just say that it's heartbreaking for him to see? So just because you don't like looking at it, no one else can do it? You know how many people our horses bring so much joy to? Most people see a happy, healthy horse, and they are happy to see it. Just because you have some weird issues, it doesn't mean that you can just project it onto everything else and then say, you can't be here, you can't have that here, because it bothers me. So again, he's totally missing the point. This is not an animal person, because an animal person would be like, there is a huge difference between an electric carriage and a carriage horse, because the appeal of the carriage horse, as I've said a million times, is the horse. Of course, anyone who's an animal person, anyone who likes driving a horse, would be against replacing them with a robot, with an electric carriage, essentially. It really is just something that I just can't repeat enough, that I can't, I'm just listening to him going like, who would be against that? Everyone's against it. That's why this bill never went anywhere. I don't really need to get too much into the why electric carriage would be a bad idea, but because there's a horse, that's why it's a bad idea. And again, he called it charming. I told you guys, it's so creepy when you see those electric carriages, because the horse isn't there. It makes you feel like, wait, where's the horse? What happened to the horse? And it's like, was there an accident? Is that why the horse is not on the carriage? And that's the kind of imagery that is. That is not charming. It is so freaky.
If you ever go by Central Park South, even the people that live there, it smells like horse urine and, horse manure. Especially on hot days, it's awful over there.
So again, this isn't actually a complaint you hear very often at all. Occasionally, of course, our horses pee. We splash water and soap over it. We have a sweeper that all the carriage owners chip in to pay for, who does a few rounds in the park every day to keep the park clean. of any, manure and urine and whatever that may accumulate. It's not really something that locals ever have had an issue with because horses were here first. We've always had horses in the park. You had a riding stable that would frequent through the park. You had carriages using the park since the day it opened, since before the park was there. Horses built our cities, built our parks. So to come along and then be like, wait, now I'm going to use this park that you built and all of your work and everything. Yeah, you know what? It smells to me. I don't want you here anymore. And I've talked about horse smell before. I don't know how many times, people come up to me that are, animal people who have grown up with horses, and they're like, can I just, smell your horse a little bit? Because people like the smell of a horse. People like the smell of horse manure because it's not at all like dog or human or cow manure, actually. It's a very distinct smell that is a positive thing if you're an animal person, and most people do not mind it at all. It's associated with horses, and horses are a good thing, and so people like, to be around smells that remind them of good things, and this is not a negative.
A person with a lot of money was willing to donate the carriages to the industry. They didn't want that. That is very odd. And it's really not the drivers. The drivers would welcome that. It's the horse carriage owners that have a monopoly on this, and they want to keep it.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah. Someone offered us free electric carriages and we didn't want it. That should tell you how opposed we are to this and how much we love working with our horses and caring for our horses. Why can't you get that through your head? I mean, that should really signal, oh, this is probably a very bad plan. They don't even want it for free. Yeah, we don't. And once again, no, it is not carriage owners versus carriage drivers. We are all on the same side with the same interests, and you forget a lot of carriage owners are carriage drivers. In fact, all of them. All of them currently drive all of the time, but they are all carriage drivers. I mean, I don't really get why he thinks there's some kind of distinction. There's this behind-the-scenes person. Drivers, owners, same thing. A driver will give a portion of the money that they earn per ride to the carriage owner, and the carriage owner will keep all of the money that they make during the ride that they do, but the carriage owner is the one that pays the expenses of the horse and the carriage. So essentially, all money that is earned by our horses goes right back to their care, whether it's being partially from the driver passed to the owner, or the owner is taking a portion of that money, or owner is taking part of his own money to pay for those expenses. But that's really the only difference between a carriage driver and a carriage owner. They don't have a monopoly. This is not a very, profitable business when you're working with livestock, when you're working with animals, especially horses, especially in a city. And every horse carriage, there's 68 medallions, like a taxi cab medallion. Every horse carriage business is its own privately owned business. So they do not have fleets of carriages. There's a couple of guys, 1, 2, or 3, maybe 4 or 5 at this point. I think just 2 or 3. They may have 2 carriages, maybe. One guy, I think, does have 3 carriages. But that's it. Everyone else is its own privately owned business of these 68 carriages. Bob Holden is so out of touch. Curtis Sliwa is only saying all of this crazy stuff and pushing Bob Holden on because he married this animal rights nut. She was a cat hoarder, if you want to talk about animal abuse. I mean, they had 17 cats in an apartment at one point with only a few litter boxes. I think 6 litter boxes. That is it. That is insane. So he really was a horse carriage supporter, and then he flipped because he married this animal rights nut, and that's the only reason he's pushing this. So Curtis Sliwa would make a very, very, very terrible mayor. Do not vote for him when the election comes. I don't even think he has a shot. He's run for mayor 20 times or something. But yeah, he is not the choice you want to go with. This is all just, trying to rally voters for him, thinking that he can get this animal rights vote in. But it's ridiculous, and it'll be bad for horses, bad for workers, bad for New York City.